At 09:00 hours off the Somali coast, a skiff slashed across the water at 45 knots, engines screaming, crew shouting in broken English, humanitarian food for people. To anyone watching, it looked like relief. But high above, Navy satellites tracked heat signatures that didn't lie. The engines burned too hot, too fast, too heavy for any real aid mission. The USS Bainbridge already knew. Intelligence confirmed this wasn't charity, it was cartel logistics hiding behind the mask of compassion. 11 runs before had slipped through. Not today. Not with SEALs locked loaded and a Seahawk circling overhead. So let me ask you, if you were the pilot looking down at that skiff flag whipping in the wind, would you hesitate or would you pull the trigger knowing what was really inside? The skiff wasn't random. It was the 12th run of a pipeline the cartel called untouchable. 11 times before the disguise had worked. A flag of mercy, a deck stacked with sacks labeled food aid, and crews trained to shout the right words in English and Somali. Aid workers, not traffickers. Relief, not poison. And the world hesitated every time. But this time hesitation could mean disaster. Under those tarps sat 280 kilos of heroin, pure and white, packaged in bricks the size of textbooks. On international streets, that meant $36 million in profit. Split 7 ways, each smuggler dreamed of walking away with nearly $1.5 million, enough to vanish into Mombasa, buy a passport in Djibouti, or bribe their way into Europe. For men born into a coastline ruled by poverty and warlords, it was more than money. It was escape. For the cartel, it was strategy. Profits funneled through shadow routes became rifles. RPGs, satellite phones, and bribes that kept local officials blind. Some of that cash landed in the hands of Al-Shabaab, paying for bombs that tore through markets in Mogadishu or attacks on peacekeepers. This skiff wasn't just a courier, it was a bloodstream pumping poison into global arteries. On the USS Bainbridge, the operators saw it differently. The Combat Information Center lit up with streams of telemetry, heat signatures, glowing red course deviations, flagging warnings, propulsion data, screaming inconsistency. Engines this hot didn't carry grain. Relief boats didn't run zigzag patterns 45 miles offshore. This was Doctrine Smuggler playbook painted over with charity. The captain's voice carried through the CIC. If we flinch, we hand them the blueprint. If we act, we burn their theater down. The words cut through the room like steel. Everyone understood what was at stake. Because if this run slipped through, every trafficker from the Gulf of Aden to the Caribbean would take note. Just paint food aid on your hull. Just shout humanitarian when challenged. If the Navy hesitated, once the sea would flood with fakes. For the SEALs strapping in below deck, the stakes weren't measured in dollars or optics. They were personal. Every kilo of heroin meant more kids overdosing in European cities, more families ripped apart in American suburbs. They'd buried teammates because drug-fueled terror funded insurgents overseas. To them, these sacks weren't merchandise, they were coffins waiting to be filled. That's why when the Seahawk lifted into the Somali sky, rotors hammering the crew wasn't thinking about politics, they were thinking about truth versus disguise. The smugglers had played the same card 11 times. This 12th time, the Navy was ready to flip the table. The smugglers had played this game before and they knew the script. When the gray shadow of the Bainbridge broke the horizon, they didn't panic. They doubled down. The helmsman shoved the throttles forward, 4 outboards roaring at full scream. The skiff jumped across the water, rooster tails of spray arching behind them like chalk lines on blue glass. At 45 knots, the zigzag began. Hard port, sharp starboard every 3 minutes like clockwork. It was doctrine, the kind of evasive pattern that made intercept boats burn fuel and miss their angles. Against Somali patrol craft, it had worked plenty of times. Even against regional navies, hesitation bought them hours. And with hours came survival. At the bow, one smuggler waved the humanitarian flag high, daring the Americans to fire. Another shouted into the wind in broken English, food for people. It was theater calculated and rehearsed. Cameras might be watching. A photo of U.S. sailors aiming rifles at aid workers could flip the story before the first boarding ladder hit the rail. But optics couldn't hide physics. At full throttle, the skiff was guzzling fuel. 200 gallons already gone. Maybe 2 hours left in the tanks. Their course pointed north toward a shallow inlet rumored to be cartel-controlled, but the math didn't lie. They'd run out of gas long before they reached it. Still, they clung to the illusion. Speed and disguise had saved them 11 times. Why not 12? On the Bainbridge, the Combat Information Center tracked the zigzags in cold silence. Screens glowed with telemetry heat signatures, fuel burn estimates, vector projections. To the crew, the skiff's every move screamed defiance. Non-compliant, aggressive, hiding behind a mask. The captain didn't need more proof. "Mark them hostile," he ordered. "This isn't aid, this is theater." Above the Seahawk shadowed the chase rotors chopping steady. The co-pilot leaned into the comms broadcasting through the long-range acoustic device. "Stop your vessel. This is the United States Navy." The blast carried 162 decibels across the water, louder than a rocket launch. Spray whipped around the smugglers, but they never slowed. The flag waved higher. The engine screamed louder. And here's where I want you to picture yourself in that cockpit. Looking down at a boat painted as mercy men waving a humanitarian banner shouting aid. Do you buy the act, or do you trust the data glowing red on your screen because that's the razor edge the Navy walked every second, the difference between hesitation and letting $36 million of heroin slip through? The smugglers had made their move. Defiance, deception, and speed. The next move would belong to the Navy. The warnings had been issued. 15 minutes of sirens, loud hailers, and rotor wash tearing the sea into chaos. But the smugglers never slowed. They clung to their disguise, waving that humanitarian flag like it could shield them from physics and bullets. The Bainbridge's captain had seen enough. "Subjects remain non-compliant," he said. "Escalate." From the Seahawk overhead, the shift was immediate. The M240B machine gun roared tracers stitching into the ocean just yards ahead of the skiff's bow. Water erupted in violent spouts, the mechanical hammering echoing across the waves. It was meant as a final warning, a line drawn in salt spray and lead. Most smugglers would have folded, but not this crew. Maybe it was cartel loyalty, maybe blind desperation. They pushed harder throttles, pinned rooster tails, stretching longer. Their zigzags turned frantic, trying to prove they wouldn't be broken. But the SEALs knew what came next. Warning fire was over. Precision was next. The gunner slung the Barrett M107 into position. 30 pounds of rifle chambered in 50 BMG rested steady against the open door. Through the holographic sight, the first engine glowed hot, a perfect target. The exhaled squeezed. The crack thundered and the starboard outboard disintegrated in smoke and shrapnel. The skiff's staggered speed bleeding away. The crew shouted panic creeping into their theater, but the Seahawk didn't flinch. Second shot, another engine seized, spewing oil. The zigzags flattened, agility gone. Third shot, 12 knots left barely crawling. And then the fourth. A final thunderclap, the last engine torn apart. The skiff lay dead in the water, a drifting crime scene stripped of its mask. Now, let me ask you, if you were in that gunner's seat, would your hands have been steady? 4 shots, 4 engines, 0 casualties. It sounds simple when told like this, but imagine doing it from a helicopter, pitching in wind and spray, the target juking side to side. That's not luck. That's years of training, thousands of rounds, and the calm of experience. On the Bainbridge, cheers broke for just a moment before discipline snapped back in. Orders rolled out launch boarding teams. Evidence had to be secured, prisoners taken, contraband cataloged. The skiff had lost its speed, but the fight wasn't over until boots hit the deck. For the smugglers, the illusion was gone. The flag, the shouting, the zigzags, it all ended with 4 explosions of precision. The Navy had struck back, and now the ocean was theirs again. The skiff drifted helplessly, smoke curling from the shattered engines. Its flag of mercy still flapped above the deck, but now it looked more like a surrender cloth than a shield. The smugglers crouched low, weapons clutched tight as the sound of engines grew louder across the waves. 2 R-hibs tore forward from the Bainbridge wakes, spreading in sharp V's, 12 operators hunched in black armor rifles ready. The pincer was textbook. One R-hib cut in starboard, the other swept port, both closing at 40 knots. Spray lashed the smugglers' faces. As the reality hit, there was nowhere left to run. The helicopter hovered overhead, M240B, still trained down like a judge ready to deliver sentence. "Hands up, don't move." The command slammed across the water in English and Somali. One smuggler tried to lift his AK, but a laser dot bloomed across his chest from above. He froze. Weapons clattered onto the deck, hands rose in surrender. The operators hooked grappling lines, vaulted the rail, and in seconds, 7 smugglers were pinned, flat wrists, zip-tied faces pressed into salt-stained wood. But the true climax came when the SEALs tore open the first burlap sack. No grain spilled out. Instead, tightly wrapped bricks gleamed in the sun, plastic glistening powder white. Confirmed contraband, the radio crackled back to the Bainbridge. 280 kilos. Heroin. The words dropped like lead. $36 million hidden in sacks painted with compassion now lay exposed on the deck. For the smugglers, the illusion shattered with the sound of zip ties ratcheting shut. Their dreams of million-dollar payouts dissolved into federal indictments and prison walls. One man wept quietly, muttering prayers into the planks. Another stared blankly at the burning horizon, knowing the cartel would never forgive this failure. The SEALs moved with calm fury. Evidence was logged, photographs snapped, every detail cataloged for court. Then came the final act. Kerosene cans were poured across the hull sacks and shattered engines. A flare arced through the air, clattering onto the deck. Flames erupted instantly, black smoke twisting skyward, erasing the lie-painted food aid. By the time the smugglers were loaded onto the Arhibs, the skiff was an inferno. Orange reflected across the waves, a pyre for a disguise that had fooled the world 11 times. This 12th time, it ended in fire and ash. By the time the flames swallowed the skiff and the smugglers were secured on the Arhibs, the horizon looked deceptively calm. To anyone sailing past tomorrow, it would be as if nothing had happened. But for the cartel, for the Navy, and for anyone who understood the stakes, this day left scars. $36 million in heroin was gone, reduced to ash and seawater. The cartel's accountants would scramble to explain their bosses, furious that an untouchable humanitarian disguise had been ripped apart in full view of the world. For them, it wasn't just money lost. It was a playbook destroyed, a mask burned in fire for everyone to see. On the Bainbridge, the reports began to flow, photos, chain of custody evidence tallied and logged. But in the information war, the truth would have to fight for air. Pictures of a burning aid boat could spread faster than the facts behind it. Would the world see a cartel scam exposed, or would they see America torching relief shipments? That uncertainty hung heavier than the smoke. For the SEALs, there was no ambiguity. They'd seen the bricks, they'd logged the weight, they'd felt the deception in their own hands. No headline could change what was real. 7 smugglers stopped 280 kilos off the streets, lives saved in cities far from this horizon. But even in victory, the mood was sober, because they knew another skiff was already being loaded somewhere, another flag painted, another crew drilled to shout humanitarian. And that's where I'll turn to you. If criminals can paint mercy on their sails and hide poison underneath, how do you fight back? Do you hesitate, worried about appearances, or do you act trusting the evidence and training in front of you? The Navy made its choice that day, but what would yours have been? The ocean was quiet again as the Bainbridge cut through the waves, prisoners shackled below deck. Quiet, but not safe. Because quiet never lasts in waters like these. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another disguise was already being prepared. And the only certainty was that men like these SEALs would be called again to strip away the mask and to remind the world that hesitation has a cost.